Welcome to the Reed Smith podcast, Career Footprints.
In each episode of Career Footprints, we'll ask our guest, a Reed Smith alum, to share their career story, how their time at Reed Smith set them up for success, and their advice for early career lawyers.
Our goal is to surface insights from inspiring professionals' careers that will help you find your professional success, however you define that. Welcome back to our Career Footprints podcast with our incredible Reed Smith alumni. I'm Alicia Millar, and I have the great pleasure of introducing, talking with, discussing the career footprint of Stacey Heyman, who has been part of the Reed Smith family for actually a significant chunk of time and in her career beyond Reed Smith as well. Stacey, welcome.
Thank you so much. I'm so excited to be here.
Wonderful. I am certainly looking forward to hearing more about your career to date and the time at Reed Smith. So why don't we jump straight into it? I know that you are senior commercial counsel at Atlassian, but way before that, you were part of the Reed Smith family. And I understand, was it 2009 all the way through to 2020? Is that correct? Tell us about your time at Reed Smith.
I was, yes. So I was a summer associate in what was then the Falls Church office of Reed Smith, is now the Tyson's office, in the summer of 2009, and then returned full-time as an associate in 2010, and then was there until 2020. Yeah. So I grew up at Reed Smith. I was a baby lawyer and learned so much for the first decade of my career.
Amazing. And it was a decade. That is a significant chunk of time. Give us a flavour about why you chose Reed Smith in the first place. What was it that really drew you to the firm?
Yeah, so during on-campus interviews while I was in law school, I was specifically targeting law firms that had satellite offices in specifically suburban to Washington, D.C., which is where I am now. That's home for me. But I really wanted the reach of a global law firm, but the feel of a smaller office. And so I knew going into OCI that would be a good sweet spot for me. And I was interviewed by Rick Holtzheimer from our Falls Church office, and he had a good poker face. I did not think the interview went well. I had articulated all the reasons why I thought I would be a good fit and why I was attracted to apply to Reed Smith. And he just sort of sat there very sternly. So no one was more surprised than me to hear from the recruiter, to hear that I had been invited for a callback interview. And then I was thrilled to join as the only summer associate in that office for 2009. It was great.
Amazing. And, a decade is a significant chunk of time. I mean, were there some really key points during that time that you kind of think, wow, that was a genuine learning moment for me? That was a sort of, got caught out there? Or, give us a sort of some of the smaller footprints of your time at the firm.
So many. Yes. I actually was slated to start. I graduated during an economic downturn in 2010. And so our entire class had been deferred until January of 2011. But the Falls Church office was going into a big trial. And so I got called up a little bit earlier than my classmates and started in the fall of 2010. And Joe Lucchini and Rip Sullivan were the partners in the Falls Church office leading this trial. And they like to joke that I walked in the door and they said, drop your bag and please join us in the courtroom. We went right into trial, a very intense 2-week trial here in Maryland, which is where I now live. There was a snowmageddon in DC. The court was called off for snow. Joe had to sleep in his office one night because the roads were a disaster. So sort of memorable from that perspective, but also it was my first trial and getting to be, in the war room with the trial team in court every day for 2 weeks. Everyone kept saying at the beginning, gosh, you're getting such valuable experience right out the gate. And, it's sort of one of those things you can't really appreciate at the time until you realize how long you go in between trials and how rare it is to actually go to those big trials. So right off the bat, watching Rip and Joe, conducting opening and closing argument, cross-examining witnesses, and I got to be there for all of it. It was just invaluable experience right out the gate. And they put me in the courtroom right out the gate too. I think I had my first trial within the first year or so. I certainly was preparing witnesses and doing like true litigation work, whereas, some of my peers at other law firms were still doing doc review for many, many years. That was not the case. I was practicing law. I was using my law license right away.
That's incredible. And what an amazing start. What an amazing start to a career. The expression, which I'm sure transcends no matter where you are, but really jumping in at the deep end and learning those few strokes of swimming and learning, it sounds as if learning from some pretty incredible people around you, really getting the chance to observe, to be part of it, to be alongside them. What incredible experience that must have been.
Definitely. Joe had a knack for, he would scour through every line of an Excel sheet. He retired from the firm a few years ago, but I think anyone would commend his sort of impeccable attention to detail. And he won many, many times on that detail. And he would spend hours sort of scrolling through documents, finding the needle in the haystack, and then great gotcha moments on the stand that I felt very privileged to watch growing up as a lawyer in the firm. Yeah.
Sure, of course. And now I'm going to fast forward a little because I understand, did you have a secondment? I mean, from my accent, you can tell that I'm not based in DC where you are. Did I hear that you had a secondment to London? Talk us through that. How did that even come about? And what was your greatest learning there?
I did, yeah. In 2016, I was able to second with one of our life sciences clients in London, which was incredible. I was there for 3 months, and I would spend 4 days a week with the client and Fridays in our London office, office sharing with Nicola Beasley. It was so nice to get to know Nicola a little bit better while I was there. And Emma Williams, my other pal from London. I know she's at the other office at Leeds now, but I'd be remiss if I didn't shout out Emma as well. But it was so fun to work with them and to be embedded with a client at the time. They were revamping their ABAC whistleblower program and sort of their global, ABAC stands for anti-bribery, anti-corruption. And so trying to better capture conduct of their employees globally and making sure it's bubbling up quickly, that the company is able to track, able to remediate, and just sort of have a better handle. When you have a global life sciences company, these are the things that keep you up at night. It was really interesting to see what technology they were incorporating to help them work a little bit faster, a little bit smarter, and just to see how these things rolled out on a global scale. A lot of times at a law firm, you're getting called in when there's an emergency. You don't really get to, sometimes you get to build these things from scratch, but especially at the larger corporations that have powerhouse in-house counsel, it was really exciting to be focused on one client for that period of time and helping them to sort of just better do day-to-day operations within the company.
Mm-hmm. And was that your first taste or sense of, this is slightly different. This is not private practice. This is in a different environment, different ways of working. Is that fair to say?
It was. And I think any law firm associate would tell you, I wonder what it's like to be in-house if you haven't experienced it. So it was very nice to be in-house for a little bit and get a sense for what that looked like. They very kindly at the end offered me a spot if I wanted to join. And I wasn't quite ready at that time. I still felt there was more to do at the firm. And I still liked the pace of helping to put out those fires, changing client to client each day. So at the time I wasn't quite ready, but it certainly laid the groundwork for getting a sense for in-house life and then eventually making that move.
Wow. It is quite a thing. You sort of think, I do wonder how it operates. I wonder what the wider context is. This piece of work that I'm doing when I'm in-house, how does that fit in with a broader sort of commercial sense of the organization? So having even, just a 3-month stint, being able to really have your eyes open to that, it's powerful learning, I'm guessing, for you.
Definitely. Yeah, I think there are also things you tend to appreciate more getting the secondment experience because you're privy to a lot more day-to-day conversation, obviously, that you wouldn't get. So you have better context for the customer, for their culture, for their true pain points, what their leadership is focused on may be totally different than the enforcement trends that you would have been advising them on. So there are certainly nuances that you gather through secondment that you wouldn't get as traditional outside counsel posture. But it's also fun because working with the client after my secondment, I had such better sensitivity to, this person in the back of their mind is thinking about maybe that promotion one day or things like that. So if to the extent a secondment opportunity comes up, I would highly recommend it. And you also, not just specific to the client, you get a better sense. Law firms have such a structure that you understand, especially I had never been in-house. So getting to appreciate the differences. In-house is completely focused on the business, right? At the firm, you're focused on the client. In-house, you're focused on the business, how to make the business better, smarter, more compliant, more profitable. And it gives you a better business sense, I think, as outside counsel later to appreciate those differences once you've experienced it.
Wow. No, I can definitely hear it and sort of hear it in the way that you're describing your experience there. And it's sort of this breadth of understanding as being a practicing lawyer it can feel perhaps, I'm doing this piece of work, which is so desperately integral to what's coming next to the organization, but then actually seeing it in practice, building those relationships to know, okay, this person's having a really bad day. I know why they might be on a sort of a very different preference or way of working right now. And equally, just, coming back to the fact of you belong and you're part of something quite big and quite exciting. I definitely heard you saying you weren't ready yet. I'm sensing back to the States, back in practice at Reed Smith, so that was 2016, 2017. And, how were those sort of last couple of years of your time at the firm before stepping into something different? How were they?
I did. Yeah, it was fun because I left the Falls Church office to go on secondment, and I came back to the brand sparkly, shiny new Tyson's office when I returned. And it all felt different. There was just a shift. I felt, intrepid that I'd been on this international secondment, and sort of coming back with a refreshed sense of what our customers and clients need and how to better serve them. And so, I continued as an associate for 3 more years. And in the fall of 2019, I had my first son. And that, of course, life shifts for many reasons when you become a new parent. So I had my son in December of 2019, went on maternity leave. Obviously, March 2020, COVID happened. And I returned to the firm in May of 2020 in a remote environment, sort of not... I was adrift in many ways, navigating working as a parent and through COVID and sort of all the things that people were struggling with at that time. And I certainly felt more ready then to go in-house. I found myself really longing for using my brain from 9 to 5 and then switching gears and being able to sort of more focus on parenthood in the evenings and on the weekends. And that was sort of the first inklings of, I think I'm ready to go in-house. And then I saw an opportunity at Slack, the software company, that I thought would be a good fit. And I figured, why not? I should apply, just see kind of what happens. I went through about 7 rounds of interviews.
Seven rounds. They must have been really focused
intense,
on what they wanted. That's intense.
Yes, I think they were. I found out later they were pretty far down the line with someone else. So they were trying to rush me through and sort of get a good panel going to make an informed choice. But and Rizzi Qureshi in the DC office, as we were getting towards the end and they were asking for references, I opened up to Rizzi and said, I'm interviewing for this job. Would you mind serving as a reference for me? And he was so kind about it. Yeah, so I was offered that job. And so I left Reed Smith in August of 2020 to join Slack.
Amazing. And I love those moments when you sort of think, I kind of have to tell somebody here and I need their support as well. And that's a hell of a conversation to have, right? I mean, that's a moment of, please don't hate me, but this is happening. And to hear that it was such a wonderful experience, actually a positive moment, actually, with you for the firm.
It was. I had such a pit in my stomach, as I know anyone can appreciate when you're contemplating leaving an organization that, I had never worked anywhere else as a lawyer. I felt so deeply embedded and committed to the firm, and Rizzi could not have been kinder. He's a strategic businessman. He knew that this could mean business for Reed Smith. So he certainly stayed in the mentor role, just switching from partner associate to outside counsel, inside counsel, and in-house counsel. So yes, he very kindly said, I'm sad we're having this conversation, but I fully support you and your professional goals. And so yeah, and and when I got back to Slack, I hired Rizzi and his team. So
well, there you go.
Yeah,
it does pay off, and it's quite a thing. A lot of people sort of say, we've got alumni coming back, and they're going to talk about life outside of the firm, and it's like, well, they left us well, and they talk about the firm well. So let's hear what they have to say. So it is heartening to have had such a great experience of leaving us, but also looking back so fondly. Tell us a bit more. So you're in Slack 2020, you're in the remote environment. Now, there was the sort of acquisition 2021. All of a sudden, as I understand it, you're sort of in this big team. Sort of it's Slack moves to become Salesforce. Is that the environment that you're kind of going, okay, now I've made it, this is it? Tell us the next stage of your career path.
Yeah, so I was at Slack for about 4 months before they announced that Salesforce had intended to acquire Slack. And then we went through a pretty truncated closing process. DOJ conducted some antitrust review. It's a big acquisitions come with some heavy regulatory review. So once we got through that, it was summer of 2021. And then we had some integration time with the Slack and Salesforce teams. And so at Slack, I had been hired to act as the commercial counsel for the public sector business, which was really exciting. They were building it up and just sort of needed someone who understood FAR and DFAR and could speak that language and negotiate those contracts with the government. Salesforce had about 40 of me. So while I owned the function at Slack, they had a very robust public sector sales commercial counsel team at Salesforce. And I also joked, I think anyone who's gone through an acquisition can appreciate you end up with a job you didn't apply for at a company you didn't apply for.
I can imagine. Yeah.
And I missed, the team was very, very kind at Salesforce, but I really missed owning that function, being that partner and helping to build something new. And a few of my colleagues from Slack had gone over to Atlassian and said, "Oh, you should take a look at Atlassian. I think you'd really like it. Culture, Atlassian was founded in Australia. It has sort of this great Australian tech company culture." So yeah, I applied and I'm very grateful to be here and helping them sort of recreating what I did at Slack, also helping them. They have a pretty good public sector sales function, but they didn't have dedicated legal counsel to it. So yeah, helping build that up and getting us into more public sector hands is the goal.
Got it. Amazing. And, I think, so for those of us who don't know Atlassian particularly well, tell us a bit more about the culture. Tell us a bit more about the people. And I'm going to ask you about your day-to-day as well. But yes, give us a sense of what it's like to work there.
Sure. So Atlassian creates collaboration software and sort of better ways to work with your team. Jira and Confluence are sort of the two major products that most people associate with Atlassian. Jira is a way to track projects and ticketing and sort of assign assignments and track them and see who's working on what and get answers on discrete issues. Confluence is a virtual document software, but it's cool. You can put tables in it. It's hyped up. You can add hyperlinks, images, things like that. It's very cool. And as part of our commitment to collaboration software, we're a fully remote company, which I think is getting harder and harder to find these days.
Absolutely.
We have this thing called Atlassian Anywhere. You can work in any country where Atlassian has a legal entity up to 90 days. So, one of my colleagues did a workcation from Paris for a few months. And it's just, there is a very nice emphasis on the company culture, making sure the employees are happy and feel excited about their work and excited about their teammates. And I really appreciate that. I very much value those personal connections with the people that I work with. So working at a company where it's so important is a very nice fit for me.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. And, hearing that sort of the values driven, the fact that, what the ultimate product is of the organization is mirrored in the way in which you work and the way in which you can interact with everybody else at the organization, that sort of collective feel. It sounds incredible. And fully remote, goodness, especially when, we hear so much in the press, as we're coming back to office, some organizations mandating 2, 3, 4, even 5 days these days. So, gosh, it must feel quite different, actually, bearing in mind, sort of some professional services and what's going on in the wider world and just that, the commentary that we hear in the news a lot.
Yeah, definitely. They're great about team meetings. So we met in Austin in May at the Austin, Texas office to be all together. I recently was in San Francisco. I'll be back in San Francisco in February. And then they do region-based activities. So in DC, we'll be doing a putt-putt for Atlassian folks in DC and things like that. So yeah, they do day-to-day, it's sort of seamless working on our software, which is great, but then still providing the opportunity to get together and connect in person when possible. It's nice.
Absolutely wonderful. Because of course, as what I'm sensing is, something that really does drive you is that relationship building, is that sort of human connection, the sort of team environment. Okay. Wonderful.
For sure.
We would know, this is a Reed Smith podcast, we would know what, sort of a day in the life of a lawyer at Reed Smith, be that on the litigation side, be that transactional. Tell us about, sort of your day. What is a day in the life of, the senior commercial counsel at Atlassian?
Yeah. So in the mornings, it is logging on and sort of checking what crises have popped up overnight. That is one of the sort of nature of a international software company. Sometimes I'll have, my APAC colleagues or EMEA colleagues will have issues come up or questions. So in the morning, it's just triaging. And then sometimes we have set customer calls to negotiate through, we're trying to enter into a new agreement, or we've, had an issue pop up and we need to jump on a call with the customer, and we'll work through those. A lot of broader projects are always like revamping our terms, revamping our contracts. Are they easy to read? Do they make sense for us and the customer? One thing I really appreciate about Atlassian is we want to bring that customer voice to our contracts. So yes, there are things that we need to protect the company, but we also want to make sure if we're getting a lot of feedback from customers about a specific term or something that's causing them friction, we really do want to make it easier on our end to use our software, procure our software. And so that's what the commercial team is trying to do, trying to protect the risk of the company while also making it easy to buy our products.
Mm-hmm. And, something that, I don't know, when you take a step back, you think actually that's pretty integral to the way in which we do business and the way in which we maintain incredible client relationships, by really being able to lean in to say, what is going to work best for you? How do we make sure this is a genuine fit? Not just, here's a document, sign it, let's hope for the best,
Right. Right. Exactly. Mm-hmm. I think one of the things that I learned at Slack, and for any contract nerds out there, I would encourage you to look at Slack's sort of standard terms that live online. They have taken what usually, you see these dense software terms, they've taken them to be incredibly customer friendly and incredibly easy to read. And so, when I think of sort of the big lessons that I've pulled from, Reed Smith or Slack or Salesforce, from Slack, it is definitely, there is always a way to convey what you need in a way that someone can read it and even maybe enjoy reading software terms, if that's possible. So I try to remember that as I'm drafting even today.
Awesome. I love that. Someone once told me, if your grandmother understands what you're doing, you're onto a winner. And I still hold by that. I absolutely do. One thing I'm always curious about, in private practice, in a Reed Smith context, in fact, most law firms, time is money, right? You've got to be billing. Every 6 minutes counts. What is the concept of time when you're in-house? Is it such a commodity and such a sort of rigorous recording as you would have experienced at Reed Smith? What does that feel like?
Yeah, it's so funny. I still find myself from time to time going to switch my timer. It just creates that muscle memory after 10 years. It's a tough one to break. But the really nice change beyond, not having to worry about the constant timer is people are much more willing to just touch base and chat. And it was so funny to me when I joined Slack. A couple of my colleagues were saying, "Hey, we haven't met in a while. Let's set up a recurring one-on-one," because I kept thinking, "Oh, I'm taking your time. I know you need to get back to work," but when you're in-house, that is built in, and that time and connection and mentoring is built into your day. And so my manager and I meet once a week, not only to run through tasks and things, but to talk big picture. Are you happy? Where do you want to go in your career? Are you observing things we need to change? And then, other counterparts within legal, within the business, we just set up recurring one-on-ones. And sometimes it's just, the 30 minutes you would have grabbed a coffee with a friend when you were in person, but it is so nice not to feel like I'm stealing their time or, keeping them from getting back to billing. It's a lot, it takes the pressure off to, sometimes you get wisdom that you wouldn't ordinarily get just because the time is there, which is so nice.
Absolutely. And often, especially if we are remote from our colleagues, those corridor conversations, those moments of, how are things going? Those moments with those who perhaps are more senior to you and do, they hold the intel about how promotion looks and how hierarchy works. Having that time can be quite precious if you don't have it automatically, as you said, in the coffee line. It's good to hear that those exist. It's something, I'm in a learning and development function. Of course, I'm going to be preaching about this, but it's lovely to hear that it does live and breathe. I'm really curious because the journey that you've given us today, the sort of the learning that you've had, what would you say has been the sort of highlights, those moments as you look back over an incredible career, 2009, and we're about to hit into 2024 and whatever that's going to bring. What are those moments of learning that you think, actually, to tell my younger self, or absolutely to tell the colleagues that we have here at Reed Smith who are listening in on this podcast, what would you say about those moments of learning throughout this career so far?
From Reed Smith, the one thing that I always go back to is don't bring problems, bring solutions. And I think as a young associate, it's very easy to say, I found a problem. But one of the things that I learned from the partners at Reed Smith is finding the problem is always going to happen. What sets you apart is the solution that you bring. And being able to come saying, we found this, but we have an idea, is what is always going to set you apart as a good lawyer, no matter where you're practicing. And then that attention to detail, sort of what I was saying about Joe ferreting through Excel spreadsheets to find the one missing number that could win the case. I mean, having that impeccable attention to detail will always serve you well, whether you're drafting contracts and think, I could make this a little bit more precise or crisp, or it's the winning paper document in a deposition or litigation. No matter what your practice is, bring solutions, not problems, and attention to detail are certainly the most important, I think.
Mm-hmm. One thing I would emphasize, again, hearing from you, and certainly the early lessons of attention to detail, as you said, the problems and solutions. I guess for our younger associates, for our younger population, our younger attorneys, really stepping into their first and second years, it can be quite daunting to sort of say, okay, I think I found a problem, let alone saying, I think I found a solution. How do you have that courage? I mean, what is it about, perhaps it's a human interaction. What is it that gives you that moment of going, no, I'm going to do it. This is what's going to set me apart.
Yeah, I can completely appreciate how that feels being a junior associate. And sometimes you're thrust into it. Sometimes you are not ready. And a partner says, I need you to do X, Y, and Z, even if it feels daunting and scary. That's where you're going to learn. Those are the best moments. Also, we as clients of the firm are paying you to look for those things. So I'd much rather you flag it and bring your also possible solution than be too timid, because it might be something we didn't even think of. Part of the reason we bring in outside counsel is for the fresh set of eyes. We get into our day-to-day and we are relying on you to sort of remind us of the pitfalls, or maybe see something, flag something we haven't done before. So it may be scary, but it also might be your moment to be bold and look really good to your partner, your client, whoever that may be. So, and of course, run it by your colleagues if you're not quite confident enough to bring it to the client. But that's what they're there for, and that's where you'll learn. So,
No, I think that's wise advice, and I certainly appreciate hearing you are a client, you are in-house counsel at an amazing organization. So to hear it direct from the horse's mouth, so to speak, thank you for that. I guess I'm on to final words. I'm on to sort of what are the sort of key takeaways. And as I listen to you, I'm sort of hearing this, again, it's coming back to the human connection, the relationships that you've built up. And, to a certain extent, if I put it into more business speak, the network that you must have now, the people that have crossed your path. Would you say that's sort of a big part of your longevity to date and will continue, sort of for the next 10 years going forward?
Definitely. I always, when I'm talking to younger associates, to the Reed Smith transactional associates that I talked to in September, I always encourage you to just be kind, or at least professional / cordial, if kindness isn't the tone of the conversation. But you just never know when you're going to cross paths again. Careers are long, and it is so funny to me how many people you just don't expect that you will hear from pop up, and they might need something from you. You might need something from them. So I always try to encourage, just be kind, be professional, be cordial, because you just never know. So keep it in the back of your mind. Yeah.
Absolutely. Absolutely so. Look, Stacey, this has been wonderful talking with you again, hearing about your career journey to date. And, I'm sensing so much more to come from whether it's in-house, whether we tempt you back in at some stage, I'm sure, because it seems like you are a great friend of the firm, a great advocate of the firm, and certainly something that our younger associates can really look up to, thinking beyond just the sort of first 5 minutes in the firm, but a longevity career that's clearly one that you're cherishing. Actually, I would say that's how I really feel.
Yeah, thank you so much for having me. I love talking to Reed Smith Associates, so I encourage you to reach out if you have any questions or want to chat.
Wonderful. Thank you. Thank you, Stacey. And I certainly look forward to the next Career Footprints podcast. Career Footprints is a Reed Smith production. Our producer is Ali McCardle.
This podcast is available on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Google Podcast, Podbeam, and reedsmith.com. To learn more about Reed Smith's Alumni Network, or if you're an alum of the firm who wants to share your career story, contact me, Reed Smith's Global Senior Director of Alumni Relations, Laura Karmatz, at alumni@reedsmith.com.
This podcast is provided for educational purposes. It does not constitute legal advice and is not intended to establish an attorney-client relationship, nor is it intended to suggest or establish standards of care applicable to particular lawyers in any given situation. Prior results do not guarantee a similar outcome. Any views, opinions, or comments made by any external guest speaker are not to be attributed to Reed Smith LLP or its individual lawyers. All rights reserved.